Welcome to the Harvest After Sunday podcast. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host, and I'm here with Stefan Wilson, pastor of preaching and teaching at Harvest Bible Church. We are so excited to be together today and be with you today. This is a brand new endeavor, and we're going to spend a few minutes introducing ourselves and also providing an overview of what you can expect as you continue to tune in. My name is Natalie Black, and my husband Jared and I are members here at Harvest. We've been attending with our family for about 10 years, and we have 3 boys. You know them. They're ages 14, 13, and 11. My husband Jared serves in the men's ministry, and he also plays guitar in the worship band. And I'm involved in our women's ministry, which you know I love, specifically one-on-one discipleship and biblical counseling. Stefan, your name and face might be more familiar to our listeners, given your role here, but tell us a little bit more about yourself and your family.
Yeah, so we've been here for a little over 18 months at this point. My anniversary or start date was June 1st of 2024, so we're coming up on 2 years. My wife Jeannie and I have been married for 15 years, coming up on 16 in April. We have 2 kids, Abigail and Caleb. Abigail is about to turn 14. Caleb just turned 12. Our kids have great relationships with one another and see each other regularly in the student ministry. And so our families have done life together in multiple ways. And we have just been so incredibly blessed to be a part of this church. We were received so well. We have grown so much in relationships with people, and have just been so grateful for our time here. And so, you know, it's easy to think that my role at the church is the pulpit, and that's all that it entails. But really, this is our church family. And so this podcast is just such a great way to get beyond the pulpit and be able to talk about things that we need to be able to talk about as a church, in a way that is accessible during the week.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be such a great way to dig in. Tell us a little bit more about that, about how this podcast came to be, why we're doing it.
So when you think about Sunday morning and given like a Sunday morning sermon, or the things that we do when we're gathered together on Sunday, there are biblical, intentional reasons for all those things that we do. But there's also limited time when we're together. And if we were to go back in church history, even just 100 years, but especially as we go further and further back in the history of the church was living together. They were in the same town, in the marketplace. They were sharing meals with one another. They were constantly with one another. And so it gave the opportunity to expand on what they talked about when they gathered as the church. As things were happening around them, it gave them opportunities to interact with one another and dialogue with one another. And while we still have those same elements present in the life of our church, Western life and American life especially has become much more fragmented than Christian life used to be. Our lives are busier than they were centuries ago. We're being pulled in multiple directions. And I would say we're hearing more voices and more ideas and more competing opinions than we've ever heard before because of things like social media and the internet. So I can hear from somebody on the other side of the globe with the tap of a button, whereas even just a century ago, that wasn't the case. And so what that really highlights for us is because we live in this particular time with those particular challenges, we should meet them with intentional ways of continuing the conversation after Sunday, being able to interact around things that we need to talk about, but maybe we don't have the opportunity to get to on a given weekend. But because of the technology that's available to us, we're able to hear those things and talk about those things because of things like a podcast. And so why wouldn't we, as a church, leverage the resources available to us to expand how we're able to hear from God's word and to interact around ideas so that we can grow? So I think that it's good at the outset for us to proactively correct a misunderstanding that we just want to be another podcast of all the podcasts out in the world. That's not what this is. This is, we want to grow, and we recognize that growth happens every day of the week, not just one day a week.
It's so exciting. You're saying it's a part of our discipleship, and it's for our church body to engage with, like you said, difficult topics, ideas, to go beyond the sermon. I know we've discussed this. I personally have desired that, and I'm active in a lot of our groups and relationships at church. But I've desired a place, a forum where we can go deeper on topics, or I can ask questions. And it hasn't always been clear what that pathway is. And I think this is going to be a really exciting way to do it, and to engage with our church body. Can you talk about what kind of topics listeners can expect that we're going to cover?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of topics that we're going to talk about, and they fit in buckets. So sometimes we will dig deeper into the sermon from Sunday. So we'll maybe go into things that didn't quite make it into the 40 to 45 minute slot that the sermon is, but they're important and they're worth talking about. And so we'll dig into those things. Other times it will be perhaps we have a visiting preacher. And so we're going to sit down and talk with that preacher about things that are important to him, or particular things that in his sphere are prominent. We also, as we have things happen in the world and happen in our country, in timely ways, sit down and talk about those things. We don't want to run to voices out in the world for things that we should first and foremost be hearing what God's word would have to say about them. And so there will be some episodes where we step away from maybe talking about the sermon or talking about things within the church. And instead we say, here's something happening in the world. We need to talk about that. Another category of things that we'll talk about are maybe things that are happening within our church, but they're orbiting the discipleship ministries of the church. So maybe it isn't particularly the passage that we were in on Sunday, but it's a prominent thing that we're talking about as a church. And so we're going to sit down and talk in more detail about that. So I think the takeaway for listeners is there will be variety, and that variety is intentional because, like you said, this is about discipleship. And discipleship is all of life, and we're whole people. And so we need to be discipled in ways that grow every aspect of who I am as a person and touch on every aspect of how I live as a person.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. And as you know, I'm really excited to be a part of it, engaging about these things and applying God's word and the truth in his word practically in our lives is just what I'm most passionate about and excited about, especially to do it in this kind of one-on-one conversation. Certainly we have many listening in on this one-on-one conversation, but that is the format. How frequently will new episodes be released?
We will, on average, release episodes every week.
Okay.
But there are going to be seasons where we don't release episodes. So over the summer, we will take a break. And so either episodes will be sparing or we'll just take an extended break. But in the typical seasons of church life and the rhythms of life that kind of drive those, we think about the fall and the winter and the spring and the summer. In our lives in the Phoenix Valley, like those seasons are, they take different forms because of the things we have going on in life, especially if you have kids, school, clubs, sports. We've got holidays, all those things. So what we're really going to aim for is to schedule this podcast in such a way that it also kind of aligns with just the rhythm of life that we've come to know in the Valley.
Thanks so much for giving us that overview and sharing more of the heart behind it. And thank you for joining us for the Harvest After Sunday podcast, where we help you grow into the image of Christ by applying the truths in his word for his mission. We'll see you Sunday.